Hello, I'm Evan Mitchell, music director of the Kingston Symphony Orchestra, and for the week of January the 25th, here's What's On. So this week we're going to be performing a very special concert. This is going to be a concert, no doubt, that will be one of my favorites of the season for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that it's a very interesting concept this particular concert has. This concert is entitled Old and New, and it examines the concept of the orchestral classic. Just what is it exactly about any particular piece that makes it a quote-unquote classic? And in the process of discovering exactly just what that is, we're going to be performing some truly brilliant, mesmerizing, and spectacular works, and it's just going to be such an enjoyable concert, a deep experience, and a very powerful and rewarding one, I think, as well. This concert, our fourth Masterworks concert of the season, takes place on Sunday, January 31st at 2:30 p.m. at the Isabel Bader Center for the Performing Arts. So I think ultimately that the structure of this particular concert is what helps us gain insight into what makes a piece a classic. We're starting with Rossini's overture to his final opera, William Tell. This, of course, is an unquestionable classic. It's been beloved ever since it was premiered, and it represents pretty much the only part of the opera that we still regularly play today. William Tell as an opera is actually spectacular, but it's 5 hours long. It's a serious Rossini opera, and it was an interesting choice for him to go out on. Of course, he retired at the ripe old age of 40 after composing William Tell. This 5-hour-long marathon of an opera represents, as I've said, some of Rossini's finest work, but of course Rossini was known as a comic opera composer, and so I think ultimately this piece suffers just a bit from being in a particular style that Rossini was not commonly associated with. Now, that being said, of course, the overture is insanely popular and absolutely one of the staples of the orchestral concert repertoire, and it deserves it. Every bar of the piece is absolutely spectacular. Now, we hear the piece often enough that we might be taking it for granted, but immediately upon its premiere, what was so striking about the piece was that it really represented a style and a structure of the opera overture that really hadn't been composed before. We didn't just have popular themes from the opera proper, we had some of that, but beyond that, we actually had a narrative. We had a general atmosphere being laid out in the story orchestrally before a single word has been sung. The overture begins with perhaps the most inspired passage of orchestration that Rossini composed over the course of his lifetime. It begins with a cello quintet, and this incredible chorale played by the cellos and eventually joined by the basses is just an absolute testament to Rossini's genius. It's beautiful, it's haunting, and it's very evocative of the dawn which opens up this great opera. Now, you may not know this, but Rossini was also a great master at writing storm music evocative of a thunder and lightning storm, and several of his operas feature storm music. The overture to William Tell is the absolute best passage of storm music that Rossini wrote. After that, we have an extraordinary passage, which is a rond des vaches. It is a call from the shepherds, bringing back the flock together after the fury of the storm. And this is represented by an extraordinary call and answer duet with the flute and the English horn. And then last but certainly not least, of course, we have the Gallop, which represents the Swiss army appearing to save the day. And this is extraordinary music that was, of course, co-opted as the theme from The Lone Ranger. So, a true orchestral masterpiece performed uncut from beginning to end, giving us a new and true appreciation of Rossini's genius and attention to structure, detail, harmony, and storytelling. So to whet your appetite for this incredible piece, I'm not going to play for you the Gallop. I'm going to play for you the extraordinary opening with our cello quintet and the two basses and eventually the timpani in one of the most striking openings to an opera overture in all of music history. Here we go. So the overture to William Tell is a straight-up classic, and we are presenting it as such. And we move on to the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, which is a fascinating piece for a variety of reasons. It, of course, obviously is also universally recognized as a classic, and it wasn't always seen that way. Upon its premiere, like many of Tchaikovsky's concertos and ballets in particular, it was panned upon its first hearing, and I'm going to read some choice quotes from critics who attended the premiere of this immortal work. Critics said that this piece is long and pretentious, that it brought us face to face with the revolting thought that music can exist which stinks to the ear, and that the violin was not played, but beaten, black, and blue. Now, of course, those critics were almost objectively wrong. It's an extraordinary piece, one of the best violin concertos ever written, certainly one of the most beloved. And in this examination of an old classic, we have a very fresh take on it with our soloist Bénédicte Lozier, who is just a violin phenom. She is the young, new concertmaster of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony Orchestra, and she is just going to tear this piece to shreds. I think of all the spectacular music on this concert, I am most looking forward to the concerto because I'm eagerly awaiting just what Bénédicte can do with this piece, and I think it's going to be something for the books. Now, the great sadness of this program is that originally we were very excited to be presenting Ryan True's Symphony No. 1, a brand new, substantial symphonic work that we would have commissioned Ryan to compose. Due to circumstances beyond our control and had nothing to do with Ryan whatsoever, we are not able to present this work at this time. We're committed to performing it as soon as we possibly can, and knowing Ryan, it's going to be absolutely spectacular, and I can't wait for it. But in the meantime, we needed to swap out this piece with something else, and so ultimately we decided on Sibelius's Second Symphony, which is certainly his most popular and the most quote-unquote classic of Sibelius's set of symphonies. Sibelius is absolutely one of the great standard bearers of the symphonic tradition. He's right up there with Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, Brahms, Mahler, Shostakovich. He is a true heir to that lineage, and in his 7 symphonies, he created a truly extraordinary sonic world, and we're all very grateful for Sibelius's contribution to the art of the symphony. And his compositions are something that we actually don't hear an awful lot in Kingston, and so it's high time that we perform Sibelius's Second Symphony, his most popular, his most classic, arguably his very best. It is a true and complete masterwork from top to bottom, and you're going to hear all sorts of magnificent things in this symphony. You're going to hear a strong undercurrent of Finnish nationalism. You're going to hear Sibelius's unique orchestral voice, and I'm thrilled to be conducting this. It's actually the very first Sibelius symphony I will ever have the privilege of conducting, and I honestly feel as though it's just going to be all downhill from here because Sibelius 2 is pretty much as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. So I'll give you just a tiny sample of this work of unadulterated genius. This is the wide and expansive and brilliant opening of Sibelius's Second Symphony. Here we go. So for this week, that's What's On. A big thank you to our friends at Templeman Meninga for being the What's On podcast sponsor. If you'd like to learn more about this program or any of the other concerts the Kingston Symphony performs, then browse to kingstonsymphony.on.ca. Purchasing tickets couldn't be easier. You can just give us a call at 613-530-2050 and speak with one of our wonderful customer service representatives, or you can browse to kingstonsymphony.on.ca. For the Kingston Symphony Orchestra, I'm Evan Mitchell, and I'll see you at the concert.